Alright, well, we did our case on Gateway, and my name is Megan.
I'm Logan. I'm Sean.
I'm Brianna.
Gateway was originally called Gateway 2000. It was founded in 1985 by Ted Wyatt in an Iowa farmhouse. And most of the first years he was actually doing this from his farmhouse and mostly did inside work. He had an early value proposition, offer products that directly to the customer, make sure they build them to their specifications, their personal computers, provide them with the best value for their money, and offer unparalleled service and support. And through the years, they kind of had to play with this value proposition. They changed it up a little bit, but what they did mostly from when they started is change a bunch of different advertising agencies, and that's what we're going to kind of go over today. His vision was that technology should be fun, it should be easy to use, and should enhance and improve the quality of life of the user. The first year, they did over $100,000 in sales. In 1996, they were the first to do the brick and click retailing, and in 2000, over $9.6 billion in sales. So they did really, really well the first few years. Gateway's agency history, this is just from 1993 to 1998. They originally started doing print ads in-house until 1993, and when they decided to expand their media mix, they brought in an outside agency, which was Carmichael Lynch, and they did television ads, which were unscripted and folksy, and it really captured the people who bought the brand. After Carmichael Lynch, Finex agency hired to handle its European and Japanese creative side, so they had global advertising at this point.
Okay, in March 1997, the account was moved to Darcy, Macias, Spen & Boyles, or DMB&B. Basically, they helped with their international business. That was kind of their focus. Their first advertisements featured "You've Got a Friend as a Business" tagline from South Dakota to the rescue. And they used traditional advertising with actors and scripts. But they eventually fired DMB&B and brought back Cora, who was the first advertising company they used. Then in January of 1998, Jeff Weitzen, who was a former executive of AT&T, he was brought in as the CEO of Gateway, and just after a week when he got there, McCann and Erickson was hired as their agency. In April 1998, the 2000 was dropped from the name, so no more Gateway 2000, just Gateway. And also they had a new logo with a hand-drawn cow spot on the box, so just kind of some aesthetic changes to the brand. Some more changes they had was corporate headquarters was moved to San Diego, and they tried to diversify more of its products from just PC to other appliances. And then McCann and Erickson campaigns. Let's talk about your Gateway and Gateway at work. And I know there's an ad on there. Do you want to watch that? Okay. And then January 2001, Weitzen resigned as the CEO, and Wyatt resumed control. And then a couple days later, he dismissed McCann Erickson and then went back to Henry Cora, who was their first advertising agency. And then they also brought back the "You've Got a Friend in the Business" tagline. And this time their advertisements were customer-based with more testimonials. Then Silton and Keene were brought in, and their ads were more humor-focused, more on the product, and it raised more consumer awareness, but didn't really do much for the brand itself. But they didn't last there that long. They were only there for 10 months in 2002.
Okay, so then they switched to the Arnell Group, who was their new advertising agency, and their goal was depurification. So that basically means moving away from the folksy small town ads to a more new, clean image. So they started featuring up-and-coming artists to bring about that new, fresh image and move away from the folksy traditional ads and bring in a new urban feel. So the Arnell Group redesigned the cow spot, so it was a new Gateway G with a little bit of the hint of the cow design in it. And like I said, they featured up-and-coming artists. But then in March 2003, they announced that they were changing agencies for the third time in 14 months. Okay, and then they hired Leo Burnett, which is a Chicago-based firm, and their biggest improvement for Gateway was their new tagline, "The Comforts of Gateway," and they didn't stay long with Gateway, as you will see in just a second. So then Gateway acquired eMachines in 2004, and this also brought about their new CEO. And eMachines is a cost-efficient PC company, and it made Gateway number 3 in the PC industry by acquiring this company. So Wayne Inoue became the new CEO, and he had this idea of eliminating all their miscellaneous products and only focusing on their core PC products. So he deleted all their TVs and all their extra electronic products and just focused on selling PCs. And Ted Wyatt, who was the originator of Gateway, became the head chairman. So he didn't completely leave the business. He still remained very involved. Okay, and then in 2004, in January, Gateway hired Gray, which is a San Francisco company, and they had originally been working on their online and direct response work, but they changed to work on their business-to-business advertising. And then in September, Gateway hired Chrisman and Porter Boguski to handle their creative work, but as you can see, that quickly changed to the Woo agency. The company said that they were unable to agree upon a strategic direction of the firm, so that's why they switched. And then also the Aegis group was promoted to handling their media as well. And then in 2006, Wayne Inoue, the former CEO of eMachines that took over Gateway, also resigned. He was really successful in decreasing their overall costs, but he was unable to revive the entire brand.
Okay, so Gateway, as you can tell, they had a lot of changes, about 6 changes within 5 years. Every advertising agency, they were changing up constantly. So we were asked to find some factors that kind of limited that or helped that, and we went with the lack of corporate structure. When they first went out to go get everything, they just kind of went and found an advertising agency. They didn't necessarily sit down, fully plan it out, weren't sure if everything was going to be done in-house or what. They didn't list out the roles, they had no clue what was really happening with that. So that caused that started at the beginning, and it just kind of tumble-followed from there. But they were also really reactive instead of proactive. So anytime they were trying to find like a new advertising agency, they wouldn't necessarily go out and be on the hunt. It was more so, oh, our sales are falling, what do we do? So that was a serious problem that they also had. And with the changes with executives, that also kind of goes back to the corporate structure. With so many changes in that, it's really hard to fully sit down and plan out everything and where your company is going to go. So that was another factor for us. Another question we had was what recommendations would we make for this? Obviously, change less, stay consistent, fully sit down and make out a plan would be our recommendation. Go through multiple advertising companies, see what all they can do for you, essentially, and then sit down and choose the best one. And then stay consistent with that. See where it's actually going to go. If they just change it up so constantly, you're not trustworthy to your customers or consumers or any other business that you're working with. So no one's really going to want to work with you or buy your products. And so the last thing, it just asked us if we would work with them. And for the most part, we said no. It would be too much work for too little time. And there's no job stability. The only reason that we would say yes is possibly because their new CEO, James Coleman, if he had a good vision and he created a contract that would give us a trial period, then maybe we could go with it, see something. But for the most part, no. Like we said, they're not trustworthy. It's just too much change constantly. So there's no job stability, and really wouldn't want to make this work. Any questions?
If you want, we're going to go back and look at one of their ads. This is before the R&L group, the deprairification, when they used a lot of cows and humor in their advertisements, and I thought this was a pretty good one from a long time ago.
I feel like everybody has a purpose in life.
I love this event. You know, Teddy, I wish I was an Olympic ski jumper.
In front position looks good. Very strong, direct, quick to the ski. Let's see how high it is. It's very high, maybe too high.
On second thought, supplying the computers and service for the Winter Games is cool enough.
Yeah, and that was kind of like the old Gateway and how they used their cow and their cow spots to kind of do most of their advertising for them.
So any questions?
So did anyone go to the CEO lecture? So do you remember one of the most important thing for an advertising agency to do?
There were a lot of important.
Yeah, there were a lot of that may relate to the case. Yeah.
Was it to like tell a story? Make sure you tell a story.
Well, you want to tell a story definitely, but in order to tell that story, what do you need?
Purpose.
Purpose. And it seems like Gateway did not really know what the purpose was and how to communicate that. And yes, that's supposed to happen through the, discussion between the agency and the company in terms of how to communicate the purpose. But if Gateway doesn't know what their core competency is, it's really hard for the agency to communicate that. And that seems to have been the problem that, they just went with one thing and Gateway okayed it, but then it wasn't really truly communicating what they wanted anyway. But it is very surprising that they switched that quickly, because it takes some time to see the results of something. So, yeah.
One problem that they kept bringing up was that the old CEO, James Wyatt, he was very set on one way, having it stay as the folksy traditional, emphasizing real consumers. He didn't really want to get away from what he started, and I think that was the problem. He wasn't willing to progress with the company.
And he kept going back to Henry Cora, which they had the same way of thinking, I guess, but as far as growing, and that he was very set in his ways, and that's where they kind of went down.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much. Sorry. No, you can go that way, I just have to. So this is
Okay, thanks.
I already sent you one.
Oh, you did? Thank you.
Do what? Oh, yeah. Sorry, I can.
You spell my last name right?
G-A-N-F-E.
Oh, good job.
Very basic.
I know. So he needs to put your keys in the Huh?
Down that far.
I have one just in case.
I'll probably wear it around the same thing. That's all I think.
Will people submit their Saturday airs? When's their night or I'd probably have to at night. So if it's been on Friday the day before, everyone will be walking through. Yes.
I think they changed yesterday all night long. Or I kept waking up thinking about problems that I had with yesterday. I'm not even playing the game.
And then tomorrow
Literally
there's
my mind would be like,
8 starts at 8.
this story.
Okay, remember that if the speaker could try to be closer to the screen.
So we'll start and then a recital on Thursday got canceled.
when I'm done,
There's still university. There's at least one or two concerts every day. Yeah, except for next week.
Yeah, you're first.
I played.
There's a concert at 3, concert at 6, that's all.
I play all kinds of, I can't just go over.
So it's where like a book with you.
This Saturday, my was on for whatever it is.
Now, if you have to close the monitor or the projector in between, hit the mute button and not projector off because it takes a while. And now it seems to be off. Did you?
Cut on, the on button.
Yeah, I think it's going.
Okay, now it's coming. Okay, great.
Slowly but surely. Alright, so we did the Benson case, but we wanted to start before we get into the PowerPoint with asking you about this picture. Asking you guys what you expect, if that's an advertisement that you saw, what you think they're advertising.
Yeah, if you know, like if you're not knowledgeable about Benetton, what do you think they're advertising?
Black House, White Market, whatever that store is.
What is it depicting first, so everyone knows what it's depicting?
It is a nun kissing a priest.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's kind of, we wanted to ask because that's similar to some of the advertisements you're going to see from Benetton. So we did the Benetton case. My name's Anthony.
I'm Melanie.
I'm Aubrey.
Lindsay.
And I'm Teddy. Here's a little outline of what we're going to go over today, just how the presentation's going to go. Anyway, Benetton is an Italian retailer engaged in the manufacturing and distribution of clothing, undergarments, shoes, cosmetic, and other accessories. They license their brand names out to just various manufacturers, and they operate in 120 different countries and have outlets in other countries as well. They're mostly known for their like shock and awe advertising, as you can see right here. The Killing and Casoda. Usually the advertising has a more in-depth meaning, and a lot of the people that buy their product are those who agreed with what the advertisements were portrayed. They went overboard with one advertisement. It was "We on Death Row." We'll get back to that in a minute here. They ended up changing to a safer plan, and it actually ended up hurting the company's sales. Like I said, they have unusual and controversial advertising. It's shocking. The main man behind it all was Oliviero Toscani, and pardon us if we butcher any names today. They're mostly Italian. And he's Benetton's creative director and photographer. He does not identify himself as a marketer. He actually is kind of a marketing hater. And he's responsible for Benetton's ads from '92 to 2000, which were all the really controversial ads. And here's one ad with the empty electric chair.
So, like he said earlier, We on Death Row was the advertisement where they really, really went wrong. We on Death Row featured Missouri inmates who were sentenced to death for whatever crime they had committed. And basically Benetton went in and like basically interviewed these guys and like asked them what they were in there for, when they were scheduled to get executed, all that. But prisoners didn't know why they were getting interviewed. So they ended up publishing these advertisements with inmates like holding up their stuff, and it just really didn't settle well with the public, especially the families who were directly affected by them. So after that, they really kind of like took a step back and switched over to a more traditional marketing strategy. So they really started kind of advertising their clothes a little bit more. They still advertised some controversial issues, but didn't really have the shock that they had in their previous ads. And like you said earlier, this just really, the customers really related with their shock ads, so when they switched to this traditional advertising style, it just wasn't as effective. So once a company kind of screws up like they did, you have to kind of settle it with the public. So the state of Missouri actually ended up filing a lawsuit against them because they felt like they misled the prisoners when they were in there interviewing them and taking their picture and stuff for their ads. So Benton actually had to write apology letters to the families who were affected by the ads, who had family members who were maybe murdered by these prisoners. So they ended up writing apology letters, and they also donated $50,000 to the Missouri Crime Victims Compensation Fund. And another thing that they were largely affected by was Sears actually canceled their $100 million contract with them because of this advertising campaign. So it just wasn't a smart move for them to publish that ad. They tried to make amends with Sears by telling them that they could approve their ads before they published them, but Sears just didn't want to continue. And this is actually the ad that they published. And their main goal with publishing this ad was to raise awareness for how many people were being sentenced to death in the United States and Missouri, because it was a particularly large number. And so they didn't really mean harm by the ad, but it just wasn't taken the right way. So as you can see, this was the advertisement. They were taken down pretty quickly. So we identified Benetton's brand, like we mentioned earlier. They were known for their controversial, shocking, really risque ads. They usually didn't really involve their clothing. They had a much larger meaning, like they were trying to raise awareness for causes like AIDS and other stuff we'll talk about later. And then Chescani, who was behind it all, he was a bit arrogant, I guess. He just really loved his ads, and he was very confident about them. And one of his quotes was, "Most good ads are forgotten after 6 months, but who still remembers the Benetton ad with the priest kissing the nun 10 years later and people remember? That's immortality." So that's what his goal was. He wanted people to remember these ads, and they did, and they bought because of them. So key areas of concern for the repositioning of Benetton's advertising. In 2000, Chescani was pretty much forced to resign because of the We on Death Row situation. And after that, James Mollison, who was like really young, probably in his 20s, took over in 2001. And like I said earlier, they changed to a much more traditional style where they backed down a little bit, weren't pushing the envelope as much. And this was one of their quotes as to why they needed to change. "We need to show consumers that we are an actual clothing line and not a political or governmental company." So, and like we said, after Chescani resigned, their net income depleted quite quickly. So this is in 2000, as you can see, and that's Chescani's last year, and they were at an all-time high for their net income at 174 million euro. And then in 2001, when Mollison took over, they immediately went down to 163, and then in 2002, they were at 128. So their advertisements were not as effective when they went to the more safe advertising. So, yeah.
Okay, so for the analysis, like Lindsay said, Benetton established itself on its strange, unorthodox type of taboo marketing. So they didn't just market their clothes, it was more like a lifestyle brand. It wasn't the products, they didn't show any of the things like that. They wanted to show the issues that were going on in the world. So that pulled in a key audience that people really could relate to. People liked talking about what's going on in the world. They didn't really just want to see the clothes. So they liked, everyone's advertising clothes. Benetton was doing something different. People liked that. They liked hitting the social issues and talking about it. It got everyone talking, got the buzz out, and that's what was doing so well with Benetton. They got a loyal following, but then after that, after the We on Death Row, things kind of went downhill. So they were doing really good, even though it was radical and some people didn't really care for it too much. They still had a nice, loyal customer base. So they were riding the line pretty good, but then once that We on Death Row, they're like, all right, let's really push the envelope. And once they did that, they kind of crossed that line. They went a little too far. And instead of doing a public apology, you know, they should have went out there and done a press release and said how sorry they were. They didn't do that. They just overreacted, forced Toscani to resign, hired a new advertiser in there, and that's when their numbers fell. And MAH00010 went to the more traditional advertising, which the loyal following of Benetton didn't care for. The net income for Benetton still is not recovered. In 2000, like Lindsay said, it was at 174 million euro, and it's nowhere near that now. This is one of their campaigns in 1992. It was the HIV positive campaign, so this was still the campaign for Toscani. This was before the whole We on Death Row thing. And this was some of the opinions that we found from some of the consumers that saw the ad. And in this one, you know, this ad does not reflect my values, but it communicates the impression that people who are HIV positive are branded. So this review didn't particularly like it because they thought they were grouping all the people who are HIV positive together, and they wanted them to be individualized. You know, not everyone is just in a group. However, this person down here liked it because they talk about the hard truth, and people now don't talk about that. You know, they like to sweep it under the rug. But Benetton and Toscani were bold enough to talk about it, which is what some people want to do. You know, they want to talk about those taboo issues. And that's the ad right there, as you can see. This was one in 1991, I believe, and people really liked this ad. It was all positive. People liked that it was two kids from two different cultures coming together, and you know, they look like they're happy and having a good time and everything like that, which you don't see a lot. You just see, you know, it's one race or another race and one ad. So people like that Benetton brought them together on this, and so these were all positive reviews on this one. And of course, Benetton, like I said, is trying to do a lifestyle advertising, not on the products. So these kids aren't even wearing clothes, you know, they're not wearing anything. Benetton, the only thing is right here, it says United Colors of Benetton, and that's their slogan. It's not even like clothing by Benetton or anything like that. It's United Colors of Benetton. That's what they want to be known for.
Alright, now here are some case questions. It's going to be kind of repetitive, but it's just to reemphasize some main points, so bear with me. But the question is, describe the critical issues facing Benetton as they pursue a new advertising strategy. And like we said, the main issue that they faced was losing loyal customers that were used to their bold advertisements, because when they switched to a more conservative strategy, people weren't as supportive of them, weren't buying as many clothes because they just weren't as impressed by their new strategy. What does the brand Benetton mean? They're a globally conscious company that talks about political issues. There's, like she said, they're a lifestyle brand, so they're not only just clothing, but they're also a representation of what's happening in the world. As I move from one advertising strategy to the next, what are the key areas of concern in the repositioning of the brand? Other than losing customers, they have to figure out a way to also be a company that still is bold and attracts customers, but isn't too bold, where they offend people and make a bad name for themselves, and still, like with the We on Death Row, lose a lot of net revenue. The probable behind-the-scenes discussion in the advertising department and who conveyed the better argument. The main thing about Toscani was that he was arrogant and bold, and he got away with doing what he did because that's the way that he was. He didn't ask anyone's permission before he published an advertisement. He just did what he wanted because he knew that it would work, and it did, so that's why he got away with it. So even if it wasn't as conventional, it was still profitable. In 30 years since the inception of Benetton's advertising strategy, which considered it a success, and we said yes, that it was a success, and that described the reasons why or why not. The old strategy was definitely more successful, and the new strategy isn't as successful, but it's still
somewhat successful because they're still edgy, just not as much. And describe the brand personality of Benetton currently, what brand personality Benetton should consider that would give them the highest possibility of success, and how they should go about achieving it. Like I said, they're a brand that is aware of current world issues, and they just need to continue marketing that and finding ways to market that in a way that is different than the rest and keeps with their same brand strategy of being global.